Dear God, today as this session opens, we pray that your presence will be before us and everyone who serves in the decision-making process of our city. We pray for direction which will lead our city to be strong and unified. May we continue the legacy of our founders. May we be granted this day the wisdom to make decisions which will be for the good of our city. We also pray for your special blessing on all those who are working to transform our city and make it a better place to live and work. Amen. If you please honor our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Counsel Kennedy.
Here.
Counsel Leahy. Counsel Laurie.
Here.
Counsel Martin. Counsel Madonza.
Here.
Counsel Mercia.
Here.
Mayor Murphy.
Here.
Counsel Noon.
Here.
Counsel Elliott.
Here.
7 present, excuse me.
Thank you. We have first under Mayor's business, a citation to present to Mr. Jack Clancy, the CEO of Enterprise Bank, in recognition of being named one of Boston Globe's magazine's best places to work. On behalf of the City Council, I'd like to offer this citation. Be it hereby known to all that the City of Lowell and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts hereby congratulates Enterprise Bank and its CEO, Mr. Jack Clancy, and his team for being named one of the top places to work for 2013 by the Boston Globe magazine. The City of Lowell is proud to be the home of Enterprise, a business that has created an inclusive, positive work environment for its 400 employees and always steps up to give back to the community, given this third day of December 2013. I congratulate you all, but of course you already work there, so. Mr. Clancy.
Thank you. Thank you. So a bunch of us were working late tonight, so we all walked over the eighth of the mile. And I just want to say thank you again, Mr. Mayor. And we're a great place to work because we have great people. And I feel so fortunate every day that we found each other. George, by the way, could not make it tonight, Duncan. It's the Lowell Girls, Inc. annual fundraiser and holiday party, and his wife is retiring this year, so I think he would have skipped otherwise if it wasn't for this year. And we started about 25 years ago. Exactly 1 month from today is our 25th anniversary, and you know, we walked over tonight and we started 25 years ago. We had 20 employees, 1 branch, about 8,000 square feet of space. And today we have 22 branches. We have about 440 employees, 225 of whom drive into Lowell every day. And we have about 100,000 square feet of space in Lowell. We're in 3 buildings, as you know, and we just signed a lease for some more space on Palmer Street. So we're going to keep growing. We're immensely proud of our heritage of being a Lowell-based bank. I think we're in the top 6% of 150 banks in Massachusetts now, size-wise, and we'll always be an eighth of a mile away. And I just want to say thank you so much. Couldn't have done it without the support of Lowell 25 years ago, and over the last 25 years. And for the next 25 years, we appreciate everything that you do for us. So thank you very much. Thank you. Bunch of people leaving now.
Hey, Marty, Eddie.
Next, we have under the city clerk's portion of the agenda, minutes of the city council meeting of November 26th for acceptance. Move to accept.
So moved.
By Councilor Mercia, seconded by Councilor Laurie. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next, we have under the city auditor's portion of the agenda, communication, motion response to fixed assets and internal audit function. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Noon?
Could I refer that a report to communications to the Finance Subcommittee?
Motion to refer to the Finance Subcommittee by Councilor Noon, second by
Second.
Councilor Kennedy. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next, we have under the city manager's portion of the agenda, communication from city manager, responses to city council motions and requests. Any discussion? Councilor Mercia.
Mr. Mayor, I thought we were going to have representatives here from Verizon. Oh, we do?
Mr. Marshall?
Yes, we have Kathy Moore from National Grid and Stephanie Lee from Verizon here to answer questions and to present to the council.
So when will that begin?
It would be probably with the response to the motion on those two topics.
So right
Two
now then,
motions.
right?
Great.
Sure. Is there,
So I would entertain a motion to bring forward the people from Verizon or National Grid. We have just one representative here today.
We have one from each company,
Okay.
which both share the responsibility on double poles.
So that is my motion, if they could come to the podium and address this council.
Second.
motion by Councilor Mercia, seconded by Councilman Donson. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Moore, and I am National Grid's Community and Customer Manager, and I have responsibility for the City of Lowell.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Lee, and I am the Regional Director of Government Affairs for Verizon and also responsible for Lowell.
Okay.
Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the fine women over here, thank you for taking the time to be up here this evening. Many times in a council meeting, in many weeks, when we have a council meeting, representatives from National Grid or Verizon come forward and they ask for requests from this city. They're putting underground cable, conduit, or whatever they're doing, and we always compromise, we always entertain them. And I don't think it's fair for us to, blast them out as to the double pole issue, the hanging. He's just a messenger here for doing his transaction. We have no right to really do that, but we needed to have representatives here so we can tell you how frustrated we are, because we get the calls from the residents in this city. And at one point, we did this long ago, and there was a plan in place with addressing double poles, and the most egregious of them hanging at a 12-degree angle, and it really infuriated us to know that these issues were taking place and they weren't addressed. But at that time, there was a plan in place, and they addressed it quite, expeditiously. And and over the years, it kind of dwindled away, where we as councilors are getting calls periodically about issues. And if you'll just allow me, I want to tell you, within the past couple of months, this is just what I got. 40 Stormquist Avenue, a pole that was hit by a drunk driver 2 years ago that has its wires repeatedly falling. I get the numbers for this. I've called them into our assistant to the city manager, Henry Marchand, leaving people in the dark time and time again. Unacceptable to me, unacceptable. Wires hanging, cable not working. 6 months ago, there was a retention wire that snapped on Windsor Street. You get the Windsor Variety Store on Westford Street. Well, around the corner is Windsor Street. That pole is slanting at a 12-degree angle, and it's frightening the surrounding neighbors. The pole snapped off and the retention wires came down. That was 6 months ago. That's unacceptable to me as well. I took a look at it. I'm not happy with it. I'm not happy going down Andover Street, where the pole split almost in half, only to be joined by another pole anchored to with a 7-foot orange unsightly flag near it, and it has fallen across the sidewalk attached to some sort of a wire, forcing passerbyers to go around it, to step into the street. Take a look at that. That is not acceptable. It's very insensitive to your customers who pay their salaries. And these are just a few of the things that I see. I'm not happy with that. I know you have double pole issues, and I know it's hard to get to all of them. I understand that. but Councilor Mendonça and I are very aware of streets in the city that are unaccepted streets in the city. So we put forth a plan for the city to address a few of them each week, each time, so that we, over the course of a year, can accept quite a bit of them, because when Chapter 90 money comes in, it'll handle those areas, but it won't if it's not an accepted street. This is a similar thing that I'm asking these companies to do. Please try to set a plan whereby you have a set plan that we're going to do this pole, that pole, and that pole, or we'll do 10 poles a year. At least you're making an attempt to get rid of an unsightly split pole with another pole aside of it. That's very, very unsightly, and it's frightening when wires are coming down and poles are hanging over at a degree. It's not right. And having said that, I'm just so frustrated when we get the calls, and there's not much I can do but to give it to Henry to put it on a list. I'd like to see something that they're going to address a certain amount of things over the course of a year or something. Have a plan in place that we can look at. I don't know if you take a survey and go out and look to see which ones are so far gone that you need to address that. This is really something that I feel should happen.
Okay, and I appreciate the passion with which you speak about the double pole issues. The particular situations that you just raised, the streets in question, I work very closely with the assistant to the city manager, and he has passed those on to me. Right. They are all in progress, so I will commit to completing those and working with Henry to make sure we get that done. We do have a plan in place. I think that by working closely with our operations group, I work very closely with Verizon as well. So I'm fairly new to my position. I came into this role in about mid-year. So, you know, I apologize for the frustration that you've had, but I'm happy to work with you, and you have my commitment to work on it.
And having said that, I understand the frustration whereby the pole is shared by cable, it's shared by electric, and it's shared by other entities, telephone or whatever. It's tough when one of you are moving your wires off in a timely fashion and somebody else is holding you back. Everybody should be on the same page and say, we're going to tackle pole number 4 over here on such and such a street, and we're all on board to get the wires off in a timely fashion. Not one utility should be holding the other back. That's not acceptable to the ratepayer. And having said that, I know that you sent us a list of, which I think one of my things is not on here, but anyway, it says N means not attached to a pole, Y means it's attached to a pole with a transfer still required. What is B, ball and court? What does that mean?
That means that it's that party's turn. So, for example, if ball and court is under National Grid, it means that we're the company who's responsible for the next action on that pole. So once we transfer our lines, there is the system that we currently use is PLM, Pole Lifecycle Management. Mm-hmm. There is an active notification. Once we process the paperwork that we've transferred the lines, the next party responsible for transferring gets an email notification that we're done and it's their turn to...
Yeah, and they should respond in a timely fashion, because anything else is unacceptable. And let me take you back to 40 Stromcourse Avenue. When the telephone pole was hit by the drunk driver, it kind of pulled the bottom out of that pole, so it left a clump of hot top all around it. Now, what do you suppose is going to happen when someone walks down the sidewalk and trips over that? We're going to get a lawsuit here in the city. We're going to get a claim that had nothing to do with the city of Lowell. So I'm looking out for the taxpayer as well, and this is my beef right here, and I hope that we can come to some conclusion here. Thank you. I'm sorry to be upset, but I get the calls. I'm upset. Thank you.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I can appreciate that at least one of you is fairly new in the position, and we've had these reports in the past. Is this the full report for the city, Mr. Marchand, do you know? The one you put in the packet?
Right, that's a report from the utilities. It's updated every so often. Quite frankly, and I was speaking with Ms. Moore and Ms. Lee earlier, the numbers, in previous reports, we found that there are poles that are double poles that weren't on the list, so
Okay.
it's
so-
close, but I'll let them speak to how it's managed by the various utilities.
All right. I mean, this does, I'm going from memory, maybe because it's printed on both sides, but it does seem to be fewer, but this is still a considerable list. And one thing I don't remember seeing on the list before is fire alarm. Who has the, because there's one on Stromquist Avenue that Councilor Mercier spoke about, and that I've gotten some calls about. Here's pictures of that one, by the way.
I actually was out there this morning.
But
The
that
fire
one says
alarms-
ball in court, fire alarm. So is there, who's that?
That's the city, and those are the hardwire fire alarms, but a lot of those have been taken off at this point, moved off to the new pole. We had the electricians, probably about 6 months ago, go out, and they cleaned up those that were outstanding at the time.
And just to clarify too, the Stromquist that you see on the poll report is not this,
That's not that one?
Yeah.
So that,
it's this particular one I don't believe is on there. When I went out this morning, I saw on the corner of Stromquist and is it Lundberg?
Lundberg, right.
Lundberg, there's a double pole there, and I believe that's the one that they indicate for ball in court. And as far as the PLM report not capturing all of the poles, we recognize that there is an issue with that, simply because of the number of handoffs involved from utility to utility. We actually have a person in place, it's a new position at National Grid, and one of our primary responsibilities is reviewing the entire process to see where we can shore it up. And again, you know, we work very closely with Verizon, so I would expect to see some improvement.
All right. But so that one is not even on this list?
That's
right?
correct.
And that's been 2 years?
Which could explain why it hasn't been addressed, because we do work off the information in PLM. So when something isn't in PLM and you're aware of it, we'll take care of that, we'll address that. Like I said, I went out to Stromquist this morning, and I have already contacted our operations group about that, and I will make sure that that gets taken care of.
All right. I mean, you know, I know there's proposed legislation about this that would make it, I guess, impose some sort of penalties after some sort of reasonable time. That's not, hasn't seemed to go anywhere. And really, the only issue we get is to bring it up with your representatives who are here every week, which is really, I mean, apart from maybe not being fair to them, it's not fair to people that are seeking new service. And so we're really reluctant to hold things up because that's going to, you know, jeopardize somebody else's service or delay someone else's house reconstruction or other project. But if that's the only, you know, if that's the only remedy there is, you know, we need to do better than this, I think. Mm-hmm. I mean, is there any hope that we're going to do better than this?
Potentially. We're actually working jointly, Verizon and National Grid, to pursue another company to use for a database, which would enable us to capture information more accurately. There's also, you know, we have responsibility for that, right? The database is only going to be as good as the information that we put into it. So looking at the overall process and closing gaps where we recognize there are gaps is going to be a key as well. So I can't, you know, I won't place entire blame for it on the database, but certainly I think we recognize that we could have an enhanced database.
Do you track what's like an average time? So there's a car accident, pole gets hit, you know, that's somewhat of an emergency, I suppose, so the new pole goes in, shores everything up. Is there, you know, is there a company policy, we commit to replace these things in 90 days, 6 months? Is there anything like that where you hold yourselves accountable for any sort of measurable metric?
We do the best we can. There's not a specific metric. In cases sometimes where there's accidents, in that case, why this one was not in the report, it's only speculation, but probably something that happened in the middle of the night, an emergency situation where our line foreman and crews came out and put the pole in, and left in the middle of the night and didn't go back and put it in the database, where if it's in the regular course of business, the majority of the polls do get put in. It is a process. And then what happens is, as each utility company gets an alert that it's their turn to go out, we really do try to respond as quickly as possible, but it doesn't always happen on the day or even within a month sometimes that alert comes out, depending on other things that are going on with the crews. However, we, as Kathy said, Verizon and National Grid are aware that there's an issue. We did bring down double poles. When we came out in January, I was out here with Dave Gendell, and we had about 240 poles in Lowell, so we did reduce significantly. That's not great. As you know, double poles, the inventory continues because things happen, there's electrical upgrades, that kind of thing. So the inventory should be moving. So sometimes it'll be hard to say you'll have a period of time where you'll have 0 double poles, but you want to keep the inventory low and you want to obviously keep them moving so that someone doesn't have one in front of their house for 2 years. We're working much more closely. We're very aware of legislation out there. We're also aware that the database could use some improvements and are working with the electric companies and the other utility companies to try to fine-tune this process with the resources we have available so that we can be more responsive to communities such as Lowell. The fact that we've been out here twice this year, you're very high on our radar, and our line crews are aware and are focused on anything Henry sends our way, so if there's priorities, but also on this entire list. Our goal is to reduce this list and try to minimize the inventory.
Who has responsibility inside your company for this?
So it would be our construction organization that is technically responsible for the work. There's a garage in Drake that covers this area.
But so there's nothing that says, transfer these lines within, like you said, the next day or the next month. That's a pretty wide
Right.
window right there.
Right, there is.
So even if it were 90 days, there'd be a deadline, but there's nothing, they don't track this, they don't measure it, they don't measure average time, they don't do any of that.
We do pull reports, we do track it, and we do try to reduce the time. Ideally, right now, there's a statute that says 90 days per attachee that we have to move there. So we try to stick within the statute, but if you look at how many attachees, a pole could still exist for about a year under the current statute. So we do try to do our best to stay within those 90 days. I mean, ideally, you'd like to be able to, as soon as it pops, be able to get crews out there. But sometimes we wait to see if an entire street's ready or a section of town so we can have economies of scale and send a crew out and focus on a particular neighborhood or area or community for a few weeks or a few days.
All right. Well, if you're working on the database, one suggestion I would have is if the statute is 90 days, to note how many of these where the action has been completed within the statute or not.
And we've given that feedback. We hear that from a lot of municipalities, and that is something that we are looking at with the new database, because we all need to understand, especially if some of these laws do end up fining us, we need to know exactly how many days.
Okay.
So.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Johnson and Councilor Kennedy.
Yeah, I mean, I've been looking at this list, and I thought it was shorter than before, and apparently this is 120 polls. And I remember almost 2 years ago when I started to ask for this information that it be addressed. At that time, it was about 400 polls, and that was a big deal. Although we're making progress, I mean, if somebody has a pole in front of their house and it's getting 2 years since it's been fixed, they're going to be upset, regardless of whether it's 400 or 120. And we need to move this forward. And I know I've asked for this before, was that the database include the date when it became a double pole, or was, so that you can track it, and if it becomes aged,
Right.
that somebody expedite getting it repaired, so it doesn't take that long. I mean, I'm pleased that it's only 120, but without dates for knowing how long they've been this way, I can't say whether, okay, they were all within 90 days, so we'll give you the benefit of the doubt that it's going to get fixed, or if half of these are 2 years old, in which case it shouldn't have been that way. And without a date in the database to be able to tell that, that's going to be difficult to do. Now, you may have it internally, I don't know. But I am glad that progress is being made, but certainly more progress, like these poles that Councilor Mercier mentioned. They just can't stay that way for that long. And of course, you got to prioritize based on how dangerous it might be. Obviously, if there's wires hanging off of it, that's important. As you schedule these for wire removal, I believe you have a process, the most dangerous wires first. Is that true? Or?
The electric wires get moved first.
Yeah. And so you work down in voltages, right?
Yep, that's right.
All right, thank you. Well, I am pleased in the sense that there's far fewer poles than when this process started, but there's still too many for some people, and I hope you continue to make progress on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You've been here twice in the past year, and as Councilor Martin mentioned, there is legislation pending to deal with double poles. The Mass Municipal Association supports that legislation. I don't imagine that we're the only community, although you say that we're on your radar screen. I'll bet there's lots of communities throughout the Commonwealth that have the same complaint that we have regarding double poles. Earlier in your remarks, you said that you had a plan in place. What is the plan, or how is the whole issue of double poles or removing the unused poles, how's that supposed to work?
This report that we provided to the council is provided to our operations group, and that's how they work to remove the poles. And as Stephanie mentioned, we try to do it just from a business sense in an area where there's the most.
Hey, all right, let's say that there's a pole on Stromquist that's been there for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And at the same time, around the corner on Gorham Street, Route 3A, there's an accident. And the guy knocks the pole right out.
Yeah.
So you'll send a crew up there right away. But their mission will be to restore service. They don't really care about the broken pole, right? It's basically to restore service, and that's why it doesn't get logged in afterwards.
Correct.
So I guess my question is, how is it supposed to work? I mean, there must be, if there's a plan in place, then there must be a plan where, all right, this, and this is going to happen, and then somebody's going to come and get the pole. How does that happen, and are the poles prioritized? Because obviously the one on Stromquist it's low priority for whatever reason. But I mean, how is that supposed to work, and how long is that supposed to take?
Well, how it works depends on how it becomes a double pole. So, for example, if it's a motor vehicle accident and we go out there, if we are able to set the pole right beside the pole, the existing pole, there are two different ways to set a pole. I don't want to get too complicated, but it helps to understand this. So there's a side set, which means there's an existing pole in the ground. We take the new pole and set it in the ground right beside the existing pole. And then there's what's called a cut and kick. And a cut and kick is when we we pull the old pole out of the ground and put the new pole in the same hole and attach the old pole to the new pole. And as parties transfer off, they cut down. And then telephone would be the last party off, and they would typically remove it at that point. So that's how it's supposed to work. But in an instance where there's a motor vehicle accident, a lot of times I think what happened in Stromquist, and it's not that it's a low priority, I certainly understand why it seems that way, but as Stephanie mentioned, it seems that because it was a motor vehicle accident, we went out there, we set this new pole, didn't transfer anything, set the new pole just to try to secure the leaning pole. In a perfect world, what would have happened is the crew would come back, they would complete paperwork saying that they've set a new pole. Our overhead line crews would know that they have to go out and transfer, and the process would start that way.
Okay, and so you would go replace the pole that evening after the accident occurred, restore service, and so you would be done with your job, and then you would send a notice to the other utility companies for them to do the same.
That's right.
And when what's normal? Would they do that in a week? Would they do that in a month? Or how long?
90 days is the time frame that they're allotted.
I get that, but but everybody doesn't get 90 days. I mean, you take the whole 90 days, it's, you know, I guess I don't understand how backed up are you that this is such an issue here, but also an issue across the Commonwealth, and probably all over the country, really, but let's just stick to Lowell. And so, so are you that backed up? I mean, how does that happen? Why doesn't the plan, if that's what it is, why doesn't it work the way that it's supposed to?
I think sometimes it does work the way it's supposed to. It doesn't always work the way it's supposed to, and, you know, I'm not sure why. I can speculate and say probably having so many handoffs in the process has something to do with that. But sometimes it does work the way it's supposed to. The double poll numbers in Lowell right now, from my perspective, it is manageable, and I think it's something that we can, you know, get through. So yes, there is a backup, but I believe it's manageable.
Do you know why there's a backup?
I can only speculate, so not, you know, I can't say.
Okay, but everybody has to agree there's a backup, right?
Yeah.
That's why
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, and so what's going to happen that's going to make the situation improve? I mean, I understand Councilman Donza said there used to be 400 polls and now there's, you know, 140 or whatever.
Yeah.
What's acceptable? You know, should there always be 40 or 50 polls, double polls in the city, or what are we going to do that will make it be that 6 months from now or 9 months from now there'll be 70 polls or an amount less than 140? In other words, if there's a plan in place, what is there about that plan that is going to make things be better than they are right now?
I think part of that is oversight, right? So as your community and customer manager, I need to be responsible in making sure that these reports get past to our operations group and they're working to either transfer lines or remove poles regularly.
Okay. And are you in charge of a certain region or area? And
Yes.
how big is that region?
I have 9 cities and towns.
Okay. You have other cities besides Lowell?
I do.
Then? Okay. So and your region's contiguous, I imagine, right?
Yeah.
So
it
if you
is.
have another city, you maybe have Lawrence and Haverhill?
I have Lawrence, yes.
Yep, okay. So I'm not sure what is it that's going to make it be better? What, just oversight,
Yeah, and you know, I will commit to that, you know, being new to the role, and I don't say that as an excuse for why things have, or why things are in the situation that they are. But our group, the group that I'm a part of, Community and Customer Management, recently expanded. We actually doubled. So the area that we cover, I cover 9 cities and towns, and Dave Gendel is my director. And previously in this role, he covered, I believe, 32 cities and towns. So with the group expanding, it reduces coverage area, so I think we'll be able to manage things a little bit more tightly.
Have you expanded, just the company now, not you, but have you expanded the amount of people that you have working on double polls because of all of the focus on double polls by communities?
Yes, I'm sure that's part of the reason. It's a big issue for all of the towns and cities that I work in.
Okay, but it really only works too if everybody's in sync, right? In other words, the other utilities need to be
Yeah.
as diligent about it as you.
Yeah, and
We're in sync,
sure.
and Comcast is in sync
Yeah.
with us as well. We meet with them.
Okay.
This has definitely become an issue. I know it's been a perennial issue, but over the last couple of years, the attention in the public arena and the communities, and also the inventory has gotten a little bit bigger. Not in Lowell, it's shrunk in Lowell, which is good, but if you look across the state, it's something that we really have put more resources on recently, because we are aware that if you just, you know, time goes by, more poles, there's been a lot of electric upgrades, so there's been a lot of road work and creation of double poles in a more systematic way.
Yes.
That we realize we really have to take care of the backlog as we plan for future projects. So what we're doing is allocating it. It's still the same crews that provide service that also take care of getting rid of the double poles, but we're spending more of their time reducing the double pole inventory, and that's been something probably over the last 2 years we've been working more on, and I'd say in the past 6 to 8 months, not just Kathy and I talking, but our senior management team are meeting regularly, and along with folks from Comcast as well, to make sure that we're able to address this so it doesn't become a bigger issue. We're really trying to solve it. And when you ask what's that perfect number of poles, well, there's never a perfect number, especially if there's one in front of your house. But the goal is to keep the inventory low, and it should always be moving, because obviously progress, double poles are because of, upgrades, repairs, things of that nature, but not to have a double pole in front of somebody's home for 2 years. That's not acceptable.
Okay, and when you mentioned that there was a garage in Drake, do you outsource this? Is this something that, are they a subcontractor that does this?
I'll speak for Verizon, that's our garage. They are our union represented employees, and this is bargained for work, so we do it with our employees.
Okay. And then I guess my last question, I think, is there a way to prioritize the polls? In other words, maybe, are they just all considered to be the same, or, maybe Henry knows the answer to this, but I don't. Is there a way to prioritize them so that if there are polls that have been there for a long, long time that we know about, that we would be able to move them up on the list? Or if for some other reason, just let's say for danger or whatever, is there a way to do that, and how would we do that?
That we can help prioritize. So, I will say honestly, I think our operations folks prioritize by the number of polls that they can get in a certain amount of time. So it's typically location-based, the number of polls in one given area. But as Stephanie mentioned earlier, if there are certain polls that are particularly troubling to residents, we're happy to prioritize those through our operations group, and that's what I have done recently with the issues that have been brought to Henry's attention.
Okay. And then my last question is do you have any idea, how long does it take to remove a double pole? Is that a 2-hour operation?
I don't know, to be honest.
I don't know exactly, but I understand from our operations people, it depends.
Okay.
So sometimes it's just popping out the pole and it's not that complicated, but sometimes the transfer work can be more complicated. So it really does depend. But realistically, if you went out in a given day, you should be able to, if we were the last ones off at Verizon, we should be able to transfer and pop a pole out within a couple of hours or so if there's no complication.
So maybe a crew of 2 or whatever we could do 4 a day?
Maybe, yes.
Okay. And how many crews do you have?
I don't know the exact answer of that because the crews do multiple types of work, so it's hard to say.
Thanks.
Councilor Lowell, and then Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I looked at the list, and it was noticeable, I think Councilman Mendonça said there was over 400, and it was about 175 this year. And it was noticeable in listening to you during the conversations, you prioritize by area. Is it possible some of these poles have been there so long because they're not in an area where there's a lot of double poles or dangerous poles?
I think it's possible, yes.
Is there any way to prioritize those in a different way to move them along?
If there is a way that we could look at age, then perhaps we could prioritize in that.
If it's been there for 2 or 3 years, yeah. It's unfair really to the people in those streets in those areas because poles haven't been being hit, or for whatever reason you have double poles that they're stuck with those poles now. And that leads me to Stromcourse Ave, and there's one on Andover Street, recently a motor vehicle accident, and the wires are still hanging down. I think Councilor Mercia talked about that. Those should be prioritized, in my opinion, but it seems if they're in an area where there's not a lot of polls to be done, they may be overlooked.
And Stromquist was certainly overlooked because it was never on the list. So I'm fairly confident that that's why that's been overlooked. The pole that you mentioned on Andover Street, if it's the pole that I have pictures of, the piece that's actually down across the sidewalk is customer-owned equipment. So we wouldn't typically touch that because it is customer-owned. My understanding yesterday is that we were going out to try to secure it to the pole to at least make it a safer situation.
This is the one over by, I believe, Douglas Road that was hit. There's wires dangling from the poles now.
I'm sorry, Henry, do you know if this is the one that,
Yes, the one that the orange flags
Flags
to
and the cones.
flag the pedestrians, it
Yeah.
droops across the sidewalk.
so what's come off the pole is a wire that feeds a customer's underground service.
Okay.
And it's customer-owned, it's not our equipment. But that being said, when I saw the pictures, I did think that it posed a safety hazard. And I talked to our operations director about it, and he was going to send somebody out to see if we could somehow secure the customer's equipment to the pole to make it more safe.
Okay. That was my concern as we go along, and I know you're trying to get the poles, and there has been some improvements, but you have 9 communities. So if you have areas of, say, Lawrence or Andover with 5 or 6 or 20 poles that need attention, now Lowell's gonna be overlooked. And if you have an area or a city where there's only 1 or 2 poles, you have 9 communities, so many a day, they're gonna be there for a couple of years. So I guess in the end, what I'm hoping for is there's just, if you could come up with another way to prioritize, not only by convenience for the company or cost saving, but on age for the consumer. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Mercy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And lastly, I want to thank the ladies here for coming down with spending your time here with us. I was wondering if this is not in vain, if wouldn't be asking for too much, if we could get feedback in a quarterly manner, like in April, maybe you can give us, the city council, or give Henry, and he can make copies for all of us as to what was accomplished between now and April, like a report, like we removed maybe 5 double poles, or whatever you could give us for some information. Or we depleted this list from 175 to whatever. So if you could do that in a quarterly fashion, and we could hear from a report in April, that'd be beautiful, if you don't mind. Thank you.
And please keep sending anything to Henry that are a priority if you have a particularly dangerous situation, or you have a customer or resident that's very upset, and we'll put those higher in priority, and we'd be happy to report back in the April timeframe.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you. Just one last question. I appreciate the information and the effort and your being here, but customers are allowed to keep equipment on the pole too? What's customer equipment? That's seen?
It's the line that runs from our pole to their home, under the ground. So anytime you have underground service from a pole to your home, it's customer-owned equipment.
So it runs somewhere from the pole to the underground station?
Correct.
Now, are those residences too, or just commercial customers?
Residents as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on communications? It's stand in a motion to accept and place on file, so moved by Councilor Laurie, seconded by Councilor Noon. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Being after 7 o'clock, we'll move to the general public hearings. The first is an ordinance to amend the zoning for CNF Realty Trust to extend the TTF district to include 122 and 130 Andrews Street and 180 Moore Street. Motion to waive the full reading by Council Noon, seconded by Council Mercier. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. In City Council ordinance, an ordinance amending the code of the City of Lowell, Massachusetts with respect to Chapter 290, thereof entitled zoning, by extending existing traditional neighborhood two-family district zoning district to include the entirety of 122 and 180 Andrews Street and 180 Moore Street in Lowell, which is presently zoned traditional neighborhood single-family. At this point, I'd open it up for those wishing to speak in favor.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, James Flood, 549 Rogers Street, representing CNF Realty Trust. With me tonight is Arthur Faneras, who's the trustee. Mr. Faneras purchased this property from the Archdiocese back in June of last year, and I think you're all familiar with it. It's the former Sacred Heart School. So we're requesting a change to extend the existing TTF zone which abuts the property on the southeast to encompass our whole parcel. And the reason for this request is because the majority of the surrounding neighborhood is either 2, 3, or 4 family buildings. I've delivered a package that you probably all have, and in it I've given portions of the zoning map for 1986, the zoning map for 2001, and the zoning map for 2004. Prior to 2004, this property was zoned two-family. In 2004, a small portion of the land located within that TF zone was changed to traditional single-family, which included our parcel and also the church parcels across the street. I also enclosed a chart which shows the makeup of the surrounding property as it presently stands today. As to the land directly abutting my client's parcel, there are only 2 single-family homes. As the chart indicates, besides the 2 single-family homes, there are 2 two-family homes, 2 three-family homes, and 1 multifamily dwelling that contains 4 units. On the other side of Andrew Street, across from our parcel, there are only 2 single-family homes. There are 3 two-family homes and 2 three-family homes. So most of this surrounding neighborhood is multifamily. The question was asked, why doesn't my client convert the property under Section 8.1 of the zoning ordinance like they did across the street to the other church buildings? Well, he can't, because that zoning ordinance only pertains to buildings that have been in existence for 60 years, and this building was built in 1968, so it doesn't meet that requirement. What he would like to do is demolish the existing school building, remove all the asphalt paving, and hopefully obtain approval from the planning board to divide the lot into separate lots for the development of 2 family homes on each lot. All the lots will be landscaped with grass and trees, and all units developed will be owner occupied. And if this zoning change is approved, nothing further can be done on this piece of property without approval of the planning board. So we'd have to go back to the planning board with a proposed plan for the development. Prior to appearing before the planning board, a representative, Mr. Fanaras, met with the neighborhood, and it was his opinion that the neighborhood was in favor of this proposed zone change, and he has made a pledge to work with them, to deal with them in the development of the final plan. We did appear before the planning board on November 8th, and they voted unanimously to recommend this change. So because of the previous zoning and the fact that most of the neighborhood is multifamily, I'd respectfully ask that you approve this requested zoning change. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor?
Yes, good evening. My name is Carol McCarthy. I live at 64 Blossom Street. I also co-chair the Sacred Heart Neighborhood Improvement Group. First of all, I would like to thank the committee that worked diligently and for long hours and many months at our zoning and changing the zoning so that neighborhoods didn't get overwhelmed with homes and that and get so crowded that there wasn't even places for us to park our cars and that. So that's the first thing I would like to do is to thank them. Every now and then, though, I think we are going to fall into a loophole. And with the closing of the school, I guess that's one of the loopholes that we fell into. Recently, Mr. Jenkins did send out notices to all the abutters, and he held a meeting in the school, and it just felt funny being back into the school again. But the neighbors did kind of like their idea. They liked the idea that the homes actually even look nice within the homes that are in the area. They weren't these big, tall monsters that they would overwhelm the properties that are there. So they did like the looks and the fact that Mr. Jenkins approached them to show him what they were doing. There were some issues that they were concerned about, and Mr. Jenkins did say that he would work with us as we did move forward with it, but I guess one of the changes is that the area does need to be rezoned so that we can accommodate these houses. They did like the houses, they liked the fact that he was out there meeting with them, and they also liked the fact that before the final stages are met, that Mr. Jenkins did say he would meet with us again so we can see what the final designs will look like rather than the rough design that he did show us. So I guess since none of the neighbors did complain or they do like their idea, that we would like to see that you would move forward with it and make the amendment to change this area for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? In favor? Seeing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? In opposition? Seeing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the committee? Councilor Mercier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It seems that all the pieces of the puzzle are in place, all the factors are acceptable. The proposal would make the development consistent with the surrounding neighborhoods, which generally consist of mixed, single, and some two-family dwellings. The neighborhood group has been involved in this situation, and we're finally putting something on the tax roll, and it went before a public hearing in the planning board, and they unanimously supported it. So all the factors are there. So I make the motion to accept the proposal. Thank you.
Motion by Councilor Mercier, seconded by Councilor Noon. Councilman Dunson.
Yes, I mean, it's interesting to see the history of this area, and it's been two-family, and now we have a small portion of that area that's, in the last zoning, became single-family use. But I think it's going to be important that we have reuse in this particular parcel and that it be redeveloped. I think it'll be in the best interest of the neighborhood, and I'm glad to hear that the neighbors have been apprised of these plans and that they're not opposed to them and that they like what they see so far. And of course, it'll all have to go before the planning board for the actual development, and the neighbors will get to speak on that again. So I think this is a move in the right direction.
Councilor Noon and then Councilor Lori.
I think this proposed change is really moving back to what the actual zoning in that area, so 2-family and 3 families, is going to be in the best quality of the neighborhood, and you get the support from the neighborhood and the contractors or developers. Prior to this, is going to Attorney Flood had approached the neighborhood and talked to them, and they all for it, and you have everyone here speak in support of it. And going forward and going to planning board, Attorney Flood know very well that is even before planning board or zoning board, if you get the neighborhood leaders to support such a project, it's going through quickly. And this is one of, it's certainly a testament to his work in this area, and to bring about, the lot that not in tax, not, in tax basis, now put it back in tax basis in a family, divided into 2-family lot. It's going to be a lot better than what it is now, and so I'm in full support of this proposal.
Councilor Lori.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just looking at the plan, I want to say, I really thought the developer did a nice job. Here he is working with the neighborhood group, working with the neighbors, as many do, but they've seemed to come to some type of agreement very early on. I don't know how many houses are going to be going in, or how many driveways, or how many cars it's going to hold. It is a congested neighborhood, but the developer is working closely with the neighbors, so I want to congratulate him and just wish him the best of luck with his project. Thank you.
Councilor Martin and then Councilor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm somewhat familiar with the history of this, and I think when we were looking at the zoning for this parcel back in the early 2000s, I was one of the people, I think, who advocated that it be zoned for single family. I mean, at the time you had a school that was there, not in this building, but a school in some form that had been there over 100 years. Church was there longer than that, and it closed. And so there was a lot of anxiety in the neighborhood about what was going to come of that, whether we were going to be overwhelmed with institutional uses, and certainly the thing that would have brought the most stability, I think, is single-family housing, which is why it was zoned that way. And after looking at this project, the price points people would have to achieve to make a single-family project viable are just probably not realistic in that neighborhood. I am encouraged that they're going to be owner-occupied units, because I think that will bring stability to the neighborhood, and I think there are issues with the structure of that building, so the likelihood of it being preserved for some other use seems remote. So given all those factors, I think this is a good compromise solution. I think the fact that it's been presented to the neighborhood group and people seem to be in favor of it is encouraging. And so for those reasons, the fact that it's owner-occupied, the neighborhood supports it, and there really aren't a whole lot of other better alternatives, I plan to support the change.
Councilor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like this project too. I just have a couple of questions. It's 7 lots, right?
That's just a proposal. We're going to deal with the neighborhood and propose to the planning board what the neighborhood wants. I think there was 6 lots in there. I think there was 6 on that plan.
Okay.
But that's not set in stone.
Okay. And these are to be single-family lots?
Those would be duplex lots.
Duplexes?
Yep.
So, and each one was going to have a driveway?
Well, those are discussions we're going to have with the planning board.
Yeah.
There was some talk about coming in off Moore Street and coming in the back, but I don't, we have to decide how we're going to do that.
I think it's a good project, and I think that it's probably the best use for that area, but I do think that you have to remember that on the other side of Andrew Street, that neighborhood is comprised mostly of 2- and 3-family homes.
Mm-hmm.
It would not be unreasonable for a 3-family home to have 6 vehicles and to need to park on the street. And you've got that long curb where the schoolyard is now.
Right.
And so if you put in 14 driveways, for instance, those curb cuts are gonna take away a lot of that parking and could create a problem for residents that are there now in terms of where you're gonna park your car.
I think that's one of the concerns that the neighbors brought up at that meeting, and what we would propose to do, if the planning board will allow it, if we come in off Andrew Street, is to come in one curb cut to serve both driveways, one coming in.
Okay.
That's what we would propose.
Okay.
But that, of course, we have to get approval from the planning board, and then I think we might even have to go to the Board of Appeals on that. But if the neighborhood's in support of it, I think that it would have a good chance of passage.
Okay, well, there's nobody here in opposition from the neighborhood, and it sounds like at least you're addressing the matter, and it'll probably be taken up at the planning board, I would imagine, right?
And we'll deal with them before we go to the planning board, so.
Okay.
I mean, that pledge has been made,
Okay,
and it'll be honored.
okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Counsel Kennedy.
Yes.
Counsel Leahy. Counsel Laurie.
Yes.
Counsel Martin.
Yes.
Counsel Mendonça.
Yes.
Counsel Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Counsel Noon.
Yes.
Counsel Elliott.
Yes.
8 yeas.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, under the city manager's portion of the agenda, we have a resolution, support House Bill 1739 and Senate Bill 900, an act establishing earned paid sick time. Motion to waive the full reading by Councilor Laurie, second by Councilor Mendonça. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. In City Council resolution, the City Council of the City of Lowell wishes to be reported in support of House Bill 1739 and Senate Bill 900, an act establishing earned paid sick time. It's the wish of the council. Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On this particular vote, I would not say that I'm for it, and I won't say that I'm against it, but the fact remains that until I get input from small businesses as to what their take on this issue is, I have to move to delay this vote and refer this issue to the proper subcommittee for further discussion. Does this House bill refer to the number of workers that are employed in a particular business, say businesses that employ over 50 workers? I need to know how and who will be affected by this bill. I'd like to hear from small business owners before I make a final vote. It's probably not relevant, but in looking at the list of people in the House and Senate who supported the petition, I failed to see any of our legislative delegation on the list. Maybe they need more information as well. This vote could conceivably affect many people, both employees and small business owners, and it would be irresponsible of me to vote on something that I don't have enough information about. So therefore, without hearing both sides of this proposal, I feel that at this point, I am unable to vote on this. I need to make a decision that'll be fair to everyone. The stakeholders should come to the table to discuss the proposal. The unions, the solicitor, small business owners. Perhaps we can make some sort of a compromise that'll benefit everyone, but at this time, I'm not saying I don't support it, I'm not saying I do support it, but I'd like to table this issue for now, refer it to a probably economic development subcommittee of some sort, but I'm not at liberty to make a decision that I don't have enough information on.
Motion by Councilor Mercia to refer to an economic development subcommittee, seconded by Councilor Lowry. On the motion, if Councilor Mendoza would take the chair, please.
Mayor Murphy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Back when this was brought up, it was after having provided a copy of the bills for the second time to the City Council. In those bills, it describes who this would affect. It wouldn't affect people in businesses over, the people that it would affect, the businesses really of 5 employees and more, or in some cases 10 employees and more. But what this bill calls for is really the most basic of protections for people who can really least afford to be out, people who could face losing their job based upon whether or not they get the flu. For the people that are in companies of 5 employees or less, they would be entitled to 5 unpaid sick leave days. For those between 5 and 10, they'd be entitled to 5 days, and above 10, they'd be entitled to 7, which is far less than what people in the public sector are entitled to. But this isn't, I don't think it's really relevant who's proposed the legislation. I don't think it's relevant necessarily who's signed on as co-sponsors. This resolution isn't asking for what the delegation's, opinion for us should be. It's just stating our opinion. And so I think because of all the people that could be affected by it, you're talking about very low income wage earners. You're talking about grocery store baggers. You're talking about home care workers. You're talking about people who work in restaurants, people that, quite frankly, you don't want to have in on if they're facing some kind of illness. The report that was also included, over nearly a 30-page report by the Women's Institute on Policy, also talks about the many benefits to the sick leave. Among them, over $26 million to the employers themselves because of increased productivity, and nearly $74 million overall based upon improved health outcomes, whether it be through the reduction of people in emergency rooms, the ability of people to care for their various family members, and so there are a number of benefits that are laid out, and that's why it's on the agenda for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I think the reason that this legislation, and there's 2 pieces, one in the Senate and one in the House, the reason that it's before the General Court is because it's estimated that there are over 1 million people in Massachusetts that go to work every day without any type of sick time. And so for those people, if they have the flu or if there's some sort of, or something else has happened in their life, they have to make the decision about whether or not they're going to go to work with the flu or lose a day's pay. And in some instances, it might be either go to work with the flu or lose your job. And it doesn't have to be the flu, it can be a recent cardiac event or a bunch of other things. And so what this legislation attempts to do is to make sure that everybody in Massachusetts would be entitled to sick time. So I think on the base of it, I don't have no problem supporting the legislation. However, I do think this. I think that the two pieces of legislation are somewhat complicated, and it's unlikely that they will pass in the fashion that they're currently written. I have no problem with making sure that everybody on the city council knows exactly what they're voting for. And so it seems to me that it would be a worthwhile exercise to send it to a subcommittee so that they can look at both sides. I support this legislation, but I think it's probably worthwhile taking a look at whether or not there are any negative ramifications should the legislation pass. I think that we do have a little time to do that. It's not like this legislation is going to pass at any moment. Certainly a few more weeks to study that, or to at least to summarize the legislation so that it's understandable to everybody on the city council is a worthwhile exercise, I believe. And actually, if this city council is going to take a vote on legislation like this, that's really what should be done before we take the vote. Everybody should understand exactly what they're voting for and why. And so I realize it was sent to the law department, but I think that it was just a resolution that was drawn up, and that there's really no summary. I think probably the subcommittee on economic development is a good subcommittee to take a look at this. I don't think it should take that long, and again, I think it's worthwhile to do that.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This issue, I think, was, well, let me back up. I generally oppose these resolutions where we're adopting resolutions in support of actions by one or another legislative body, whether it be at the State House, whether it be at Congress. Way back to a group of people wanted us to oppose the Patriot Act. And I can remember, spending hours of debate on that, on a very complex piece of federal legislation that I think we have enough division in this chamber on things that are actually within our control, and I'm generally not a fan of inviting more division on things that really we have no control over, and that our view on this is not going to be really paid much attention to. But given that, but in the course of the recent re-election campaign, this was an issue, a question presented at various candidate forums, and I know some of us were asked, would you use the authority of your office to support this type of legislation? And at least I answered yes to those questions, and I think a number of us did. And so, and I think this will have an impact on small business. There's no question about that. In fact, I think among us sitting here, I know it's going to impact me. I'm the one who has employees that sit here, although we do offer sick time to our employees. Not everybody has the ability to do that, and so there will be some impact. However, because it has come up recently, and because of the commitments I made, and in spite of my reluctance to jump into these issues, I'd support this legislation. I don't really see a whole lot of need to study it further. I've read through what was presented to us and ready to vote on it.
Councilor Laurie. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am actually seconding the motion to send it to the subcommittee. I was ready to vote on it tonight. I support it, and I support both bills. But out of respect to the various members of the council, if they wanted to go to a subcommittee, I would support it. But I would support this tonight. By sending it to the subcommittee, one of the other things, the opportunities, the people who are going to be affected by this on both sides, but especially people who don't have the sick leave now, as Councilor Kennedy was saying, people who have to make that choice going to work would have the opportunity to come forward and state their case and really the need for this bill. I'm ready to support it tonight, but I did, out of respect to the other councilors, say I would send it to the subcommittee, but I think it would also give these people an opportunity to come and really at a public forum state their case. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, the motion is to refer the item to the subcommittee. Roll call.
Counsel Kennedy.
Yes.
Counsel Leahy. Counsel Laurie.
Yes.
Counsel Martin.
No.
Counsel Mendoza.
Yes.
Counsel Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
No.
Counsel Noon.
Yes.
Counsel Elliott.
Yes.
6 yeas.
The motion passes. The mayor will resume the chair.
Next, we have a communication from the planning board to vote to introduce an amendment to the Code of Ordinances of the City of Lowell, Massachusetts with respect to Chapter 290. They're entitled Zoning pertaining to a rezone petition to introduce the TTF district to parcels located at 122 and 130 Andrew Street and 180 Moore Street. Entertain a motion to accept and place on file. So moved by Council Noon, seconded by Council Laurie. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Reports. We have the zoning subcommittee of December 3rd, 2013. Council Noon.
Thank you, Mayor. The zoning subcommittee meet tonight at 5:30. With me was Councilor Martin, and with the subcommittee was Councilor Mercia, Councilor Mendonca, Councilor Laurie, and Councilor Kennedy, and about 15 other resident and business owners. About 10 of them spoke at the meeting. 2 out of the 10 won the council or the subcommittee to recommend a TMU zoning, or that the change, the zoning amendment that we should vote on it and to support it, to have safeguard for the neighborhood. But the rest of them basically said, look, they support the redevelopment in the area, but the kind of redevelopment that respect the characters and the quality of the neighborhood. They also talk about the traffic and safety for children crossing the street, going to Shed Park. They talk about a number of other things, and most important, majority of them agree that they want to see a common ground, a middle ground that was suggested by Mr. Becky, the Director of Planning and Development Office, that we should look at a new zoning district, draw that, and have include both party, the business as well as the resident, in the dialogue, and to do it soon, and to not sit on it, and not do anything about it. I think we all agree that zoning should be, to implement the city long-term vision, and that everyone, that involved at stake in this, that is the business and the neighborhood, should be invited to share their concern and their issue. So what we did was the subcommittee then took a vote. Councilor Martin recommended that we delay action on the zoning amendment while requesting the DPD to draw that new zoning district and work with both parties. And we're going to do that, and we're going to do that in a speedy manner, and in a way that is really fair and take into account the quality and the character of the neighborhood. So I do welcome, because Councilor Martin and other councilors here, if they like to add on to that. Thank you, sir.
A motion by Councilor Noon, seconded by Councilor Martin. Any discussion on the motion? And that's to refer back to the planning department
Yes,
for
sir.
more comprehensive development of that zoning. Councilor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to support the motion. Residents in this neighborhood have been working with planning and development, with the city, with neighborhood leaders for, I think it's a couple of years now. This is the first. It was brought before the council months ago. This was referred to the planning board. Planning board has been working on it. They made adjustments. They made amendments already. Public hearings have been held. The proponents came back just a couple of weeks ago with the understanding that this was going to be resolved, just going to go to the subcommittee, and that they were going to address whatever concerns there were. So now to just delay this even longer and essentially try to, it doesn't seem like there's, progress is being made. And I think it's unfortunate. I think there's been ample time to have discussion, and it doesn't make sense that the process always is just going to be stalled. So I'm not going to support the motion. I think the proponents, the planning board, and those people affected by this, directly affected by it, businesses as well, have done their due diligence. And they wanted a vote a couple of weeks ago. We agreed to delay it, to bring it back, to resolve these issues, and now it's just, the goal keeps being moved to a time uncertain. So I think we owe, I think we have an obligation to vote on this one way or the other, and it seems that it's just a delay, just another delay, so I'm not going to support it.
Councilor Martin.
Well, it's not a delay for delay's sake, and in fact, many of the neighborhood residents who are supportive of the change are also supportive of efforts to look at whether a new zone could come up and be more beneficial to all involved. So almost every speaker that spoke expressed a willingness to participate in that process. A number of them did push for an up or down vote on the current proposal, but nearly all of them expressed an interest in trying to still work on this to see if there's something that can be achieved better. I think there's recognition by both the residents that the zone that they're pushing for some of these properties may not be the best one, and there's recognition by some of the business owners that it may not be the best one for them either, which is the reason to give it a kind of a more considered approach than as opposed to an all or nothing, let's have it be this zone or this zone, when a new third zone might make more sense. So I don't think the council has had a whole lot of time to consider something this important that affects this many properties. And there was considerable interest by almost everybody who spoke at the subcommittee hearing for this approach. So I don't think it's at all a delay trying to get around the issue or bury the issue or not vote on the issue, because it will come to a vote. I'm very confident of that. And I'm hopeful that when it does come to the vote, we will have a lot more proponents than we would have for this vote. Having been at this a while, I'm sure we're not going to have 100% unanimity no matter how this comes out, but I'm very hopeful and optimistic that we're going to have a lot more support for the ultimate conclusion than we have right now.
Councilor Lowry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I attended the meeting earlier tonight, and I want to thank Adam Bakey and the DPD for all the work they've done, and I'd like to congratulate both parties for trying to work through this, and it's not going to be a long process. I think the next subcommittee, Councilor Noon is hoping to have within 2 weeks, and they'll hopefully work through it very quickly. And I think both sides realized, and I congratulate Mr. Bakey, a couple of things did come up between the last meeting we had and tonight, and one is that many of the changes to TMU that I think the residents wanted would be actually grandfathered then to the old property owners. And in light of that, and some of the property owners now with the changes, and how much room you need to do reconstruction. So there's a few issues here to move forward, but I thought it was a great idea, and I do congratulate both parties. I think what they both want is something that's going to look good for the neighborhood and work good for the neighborhood 7 or 8 years down the line, so I wish them the best of luck. So thank you.
Councilor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councilor Martin is correct. Although the matter, the neighbors may have been dealing with this issue for a long time, for more than a year, this city council hasn't been dealing with it for that long, but it is dealing with it now. But I think that oftentimes it's more important to be a little bit more deliberate and to do it correct rather than to do it quickly. There's no advantage to doing it quickly if it's going to be, if it's going to create problems down the road. And I think, first of all, I'm not sure that that the votes would be exist on this council to pass the amendment. But even if they did, I'm not sure that that the proponents of the amendment have been thoroughly thoughtful about what kind of development could go on Route 38 if the amendment passes. In any event, I think that that we're far better off looking at creating a separate zoning district and one that makes sense for the area, one that makes sense for the future, and a zoning district that is created with input from both sides from the beginning. I think probably one of the problems that's been inherent with this amendment is that one side, everybody wasn't included in the discussions over the past 2 years. And that's important, and it's important that exists this time, and I feel confident that it will. And so I think that the recommendation of the subcommittee is a good one, and it's one that I support wholeheartedly.
Any further discussion? Councilman Donson.
Excuse me. This is obviously a very difficult decision for everyone. And I am going to support sending it on for further work in the hopes that we get some compromise that's agreeable to some of both groups. What we have right now is the proponents who don't have any ownership interest in any of these parcels, forcing their will on those that do. And universally, those that own the parcels don't want to change. So no matter what we do, there's going to be one group or the other that's not going to like the decision. So I prefer that they work out some plan that's agreeable to at least some of both groups and not clearly divided amongst those who own the parcels versus those who don't. And if it's not delayed, I'll just say right now that if it's not delayed, I'm opposed to the change. So I'm going to support this referring to subcommittee in order that they come up with some resolution that can be agreeable to both parties, which right now we don't have. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilor Kennedy.
Yes.
Councilor Leahy. Councilor Laurie.
Yes.
Councilor Martin.
Yes.
Councilor Mendoza.
Yes.
Councilor Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Councilor Noon.
Yes.
Councilor Elliott.
No.
Next, we have general petitions. One claim for personal injury. Entertain a motion to refer to the Law Department for report and recommendation. So moved by Councilor Noon, seconded by Councilman Donson. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. We have a miscellaneous petition by Charlotte Young, requests one handicap parking sign at 19 Kingsman Street. Entertain a motion to refer to the traffic engineer. So moved by Councilman Donson, seconded by Councilor Martin. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Motions First motion by Councilor Mercia, request to be allowed to express my views on the recent decision by the Retirement Board regarding Mrs. Finnegan. Seconded by Councilor Martin. Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through this motion, I would like to express my thoughts on a recent development involving a situation in the city that leaves me not only disturbed, but totally embarrassed. I am embarrassed to be a part of a city that is so insensitive to a dead man's widow that they would ask her to pay retroactive money that was the city's mistake to begin with. Oh, wait a minute, the retirement board's mistake to begin with. I am fully aware that this is a decision reached by the retirement board, though not unanimous. Let me first state that I know there are rules and regulations. There was a particular rule that was changed in 2010 that stated that people were only qualified if they worked 20 hours and were elected, not appointed. I never remembered that this rule took place. Was anyone notified of this specific change? Was anybody that time notified that they were no longer eligible? Was Mrs. Finnegan notified that time, or did the city wait 3 years later only to embarrass the widow? If policies are changed and rules are made, stick by it. I agree. But when no one is aware of a mistake and then it is discovered, as in this case, 3 years later, in my opinion, the city was wrong. Correct the mistake and move on. Don't go back in time and cause more heartache. I understand now that Mrs. Finnegan can file for a waiver, yet more heartache. Again, we must follow the rules. Well, the rules also say that the final decision rests with the appointing authority, and that decision shall be final. And I think that the manager is the appointing authority, so that decision could probably rest with him. Or should I say that you presented to the council, the board, that your choice for that appointment to the board, and we voted for that person. We vote for the retirement board people. If that is the case, then the decision of the appointing authority rests with us. If not, I'm asking the manager, by the way, excuse me, where is the manager this evening? Because I didn't even know that he wasn't going to be here. Through you to Henry, where is the city manager this evening? I didn't even know he was not going to be here.
He was off today.
He's off today. He didn't tell me that he was off today. I didn't get a text or anything, but I guess he can take a day off. But I'm asking that the manager do the right thing and dismiss this retroactive charge. The city made a mistake. Don't wait for yet another lawsuit that we probably will lose anyway, or magnify it to a figure that we can't probably afford. But I just want to make this statement that I was asked by a phone call just before I came here this evening to rescind my motion. Do not embarrass the retirement board so that they can rectify the situation. As if I was going to back down today and say, okay, I'm not going to say anything now. You called and I don't want to embarrass anybody. Well, I'm embarrassed by what took place here, that a very ill man took it upon himself to be on the retirement board knowing that he was ill, and yet he never, ever missed a meeting. Never missed a meeting. He didn't retire from the retirement board or leave the retirement board because he was sick. He died while he was serving. He served this city to the day he died, and this is what they do to his widow. I am totally embarrassed, and I'm saying here, do the right thing. This is the scenario that I would say is taking place here. Now, people think, oh, she don't know what she's talking about, but I do, because I did investigate. We're going to give you a choice, Mrs. Finnegan. If you don't appeal your decision for a pension, we won't charge you for retroactive. But if you appeal that decision of the pension, we'll make you pay retroactive money. Well, you know what? That is completely wrong. I would have said, this is what I would have said. the rules changed in 2010, but somewhere along the line, there was a slip-up. So what I'm going to do is, we're going to forgive you the restitution, but we're going to stop your pension. If you care to file an appeal, go right ahead. That didn't take place. It's either one or the other. It's you do it this way or else you're penalized. This is not wrong. We talk about fairness. This is certainly not fair. And I'm totally insulted by everything that took place here. And to receive a call to say, don't say a word, don't embarrass. Well, I am embarrassed, and you should be embarrassed for what you did to a woman here, a widow. I'm totally flabbergasted by this taking place, and I'm asking through this motion to do the right thing. Do the right thing. The law is the law. I understand that. The law says that we have to pay our water and sewer bill, but yet I uncovered a street for 8 years that didn't pay a water and sewer bill, and now they are. But we're not saying go back 8 years and pay us of all the money because we made a mistake, but you're going to pay for it. We didn't do that there, and we shouldn't do it in this case here. And that's all I have to say, and I'm flabbergasted.
Any further discussion? Councilor Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can appreciate that there are different jurisdictions and, different boards have different authorities, and we need to and have always respected those. But the appreciation of those nuances are not always apparent to the public. The public, when they see something they think is wrong, usually they show up here at the city council to the elected body. And no one's talked to me about this. No one on the retirement board has talked about this. The person involved has not talked to me about this. But the notion of trying to recover payments that were made in error, there does appear to be, to me anyway, some inherent unfairness in that. And so I understand people have legal rights and there are legal positions that need to be worked out. But I was encouraged to hear that there's an avenue for appeal, and I'm hopeful that will work out. I would just encourage the retirement board to do that. I think going down the road of seeking retroactive reimbursement is not something that sheds a favorable light on the city as a whole, and I think they should do what's in their authority to avoid doing that.
Madam Auditor?
If I may, we can't grant a waiver till one is requested. One has been requested. We'll be voting on that the 20th. And I can't speak for the rest of the board, but I can tell you that I'll be voting for the waiver.
Councilor Kennedy and Councilor Elliott.
Mr. Mayor, I think that maybe the retirement board can't grant a waiver until one is requested, but I believe in the letter that Mr. Sacco sent to Mrs. Finnegan, he indicated that she could request a waiver. I'm not sure that advice has been given to anybody else besides, that I know of, besides Mrs. Finnegan. I have to say that I agree with the remarks of Councilor Mercia and Councilor Martin. And I think there's this case which has received quite a bit of notoriety. There's also the Walter Bayless case, which received quite a bit of notoriety. And I think there are probably others that maybe haven't been as celebrated or haven't received as much notoriety as those two, where it seems that years ago, in the recent past, but years ago, people that retired were given information by either retirement board or by the city, and they relied on that information to be true. And if it comes a time where it's found out that that information is erroneous and is not true, it seems to me that that should be tough luck for the retirement board, not tough luck for the retiree. The retiree depends on and considers the people on the retirement board and the people in the city to be authority figures to know exactly what they're talking about. And if they're given advice and if they've made retirement plans based on that advice, then the city and the retirement board should hold true, and the appointing authority should stick with that no matter what. And so I think that I'm hoping that the retirement board grants the waiver in this case, but I would hope that if there are other cases, and Mr. Bayless's case comes to mind, but others that maybe nobody knows about yet, but that are out there, that those should be treated in an equitable way. And in this case, and in my view, Mr. Bayless's case, were not treated in an equitable way. I felt like we gave Mr. Bayless the short end of the stick, just like we did in this instance. And I'm sure that those aren't the only two. I'm sure that there are probably others that nobody knows about. But if there was bad information that was given out years ago, as long as correct information is given out now, then going forward, everything should be done correctly. But it seems to me that if we've made commitments, and if the retirement board's made commitments, that we should honor those commitments, even if it's based on information that is later found out to be erroneous. That's what I think is just and equitable.
Councilor Elliott.
Thank you. This is a good motion, Council Mercia. I was too very troubled when I read in the newspaper that the retirement board was going after $18,000 from Deborah Finnegan, the widow of former License Commissioner Edward Finnegan. I think the worst part about this is the board is seeking money because of a mistake they made, not a mistake that Mrs. Finnegan did. That is wrong. Where is the compassion in government in this city? I feel horribly for Mrs. Finnegan. She doesn't deserve to have all of this happen to her. She did nothing wrong, and it's abundantly clear. The retirement board needs to start owning up to its own mistakes and stop trying to reclaim funds from others who played no role in the board's mistakes. They need to get their act together and figure out what policies are, what are the legal issues, what is right, and enforce them consistently. I think it should be noted the only reason we're here discussing ongoing problems with the retirement system is because the city manager couldn't let go of a political vendetta he held against Mr. Bayless. Instead of letting a legal settlement be the end of it, he had the retirement board go after him, and that's why we're here today. I suggest we amend Council Mercia's motion to state the city council be recorded in support of Deborah Finnegan's waiver request before the retirement board. I'd like to make that in the form of an amendment to the motion, if that's okay to the maker of the motion.
It is, yes.
Motion to amend by Councilor Elliott, seconded by Councilor Mercia. Further discussion, Councilor Kennedy.
Yes, there has.
Any further discussion on the motion? Councilor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I listened to the conversation that goes through, and I've been involved in employees' rights in the past with the unions, and in a case where it appears misinformation was given, that person takes it in good faith, that this is what they're entitled to. I would support the motion by Councilor Elliott. These people accepted these benefits in good faith, and the city offered them in good faith. Now, whether there was a problem somewhere, but if the city offered it, it should be willing to back its responsibility that it was offered. That's all I want to say, and I think it's a good motion by Councilor Elliott, and I plan to support it. Thank you.
Councilman Donza.
I know this is difficult. As individuals, we might say that that's unfair, it shouldn't be done. And certainly if it were my money, I would say, all right, if I made the mistake, I'll swallow it, and we'll just correct it going forward. That's one thing you can do, but we're not dealing with my money. We're dealing with taxpayer and public dollars, and sometimes we bureaucratically have to follow certain procedures in order to correct things, and it doesn't come out looking pretty. Usually when government does things, it doesn't work out as well as might be hoped. I understand that they're following a procedure. I do hope that they'll grant the waiver and that what the recipient received without any fraud on their part is not their problem. But there are laws in place that we're required to do certain things, and once we discover that the law is being broken, we can't continue to break the law. Some corrective action must be taken. But we must do it with some compassion, and of course, again, procedures may have to be followed. So I'm glad that they alerted the recipient to the procedure that they needed to follow, and I'm sorry for the heartache it's caused, and I certainly would like them to continue receiving benefits that they thought they were going to, but by law, they're not entitled to them, and that needs to be corrected. So moving forward, I think we need to do things to correct it, but obviously the city needs to follow the law and the procedures in place, and when we find out that people who are receiving benefits are not entitled to them, the public person out there, the taxpayer, is going to want to make sure that their rights are preserved too, that they're not paying for something that someone's not entitled to. So I do hope that the matter will be corrected at the next meeting, and that at the same time, the public interest will be protected as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Next motion by Councilor Elliott requests the City Council discuss the advertising of boards and commissions. Second by Councilor Kennedy. Councilor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I filed this motion because I know people have asked me, how do I find out about, positions that are open? And I know they're posted, I believe they're posted on the city website and maybe the manager's blog, but in large part, people don't know what positions are open. And I know Councilor Kennedy has filed numerous motions, as well as all of us, on what boards are open, how do we, why are there vacancies? So I would like to see if there's a way for us to advertise, or at least on a quarterly basis, or maybe monthly basis, let's say quarterly basis for talking purposes, at least send a communication to the newspaper and ask that they post it. I know many communities do this. In fact, I saw a while back the Boston Globe posted notices of vacancies for a community on boards and commissions. So, I think it's important, even if we have to pay for a small ad, that it's worthwhile for people to see. I think it's, not everybody goes online. Not everybody checks websites for boards and commissions. If they see an advertisement in the newspaper or posting or legal notice, I think that would benefit and, get more people involved, more people interested. So I don't belabor the issue, but that is, that's my thought behind trying to, get more interest and at least notification. So I guess I would amend my motion to the manager to come back with options to get notice out to the newspaper or the radio or any venue.
Councilor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may add, I think that we all received an email indicating that besides maybe the word not going out loud and clear to everybody, sometimes what the announcements or the notifications that are on the manager's blog are different than what's on the city's website, which causes for confusion rather than clarification of what boards are open. So, you may be interested in serving on, the Board of Parks, for instance, and you don't realize that there's an opening because you just went to check the city website and there wasn't one, but if you had checked the manager's blog, then you would realize that there was one. And I'm not sure which is supposed to, which trumps, which is the most accurate, the city's website or the manager's blog. I'm not sure anybody knows that. But anyways, the point is, they should be the same, or else it just shouldn't be in the manager's blog at all.
Council Laurie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm not opposed to taking, spending money in the advertising with the newspapers or radio, but a lot of people watch these meetings, and a lot of people who watch these meetings are concerned with good government or government in general. Maybe we could work with the people who show the meetings to, before the meetings or after, if we could put down what maybe jobs are open or what boards or commissions have openings also. That may be an opportunity at that time. But I don't have any opposition to taking out ads either. But a lot of people do watch the meetings. And what the heck, if we can put it up and they can see it, all the better. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this motion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next motion by Council Elliott, request the City Council receive the report presented to the School Committee on the future of the high school and other schools. Seconded by Council Kennedy. Council Elliott.
Motion really speaks for itself. I know that there have been ongoing discussions and reports available. I thought it was important that the City Council get a copy of that report, considering the discussions that are taking place.
I don't know who this motion is addressed to, but I would say that the report is on the school's website.
Okay.
You can find it under Lowell K.K12.ma.us.
Well, I guess, thank you. I think that's a good idea. I don't go on the Lowell website. I guess I will, but if we could furnish, I guess request would be to either you, Mr. Mayor, or the city manager to furnish members of the City Council with a copy. I would
Like a
appreciate
hard
it.
copy?
That'd be great.
Sure. Any further discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Next motion by Council Elliott, request the city manager provide report on efforts to fill downtown storefronts. Second by Council Kennedy.
Thank you again. Motion does speak for itself. There are many storefronts downtown that are empty, and I'm not sure what the efforts are, but I think it's important to find out what we are doing and seek other options, see what other communities are doing to try to fill those storefronts. And you know, I'm just trying to follow through on some economic development issues that we really need to stimulate. We need to get more businesses downtown, more activity, and so I want to find out what exactly the city is doing currently to fill these storefronts downtown. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Last motion by Council Kennedy, request the city manager negotiate with the Chancellor of UMass Lowell to improve lighting at leased parking facility at Sheehy Park. Seconded by Council Laurie. Council Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You'll recall that I brought this up last week, but I thought I would just file it as a motion. I had an opportunity earlier today to speak to Chancellor Meehan briefly about the motion. And anyways, the parking area that we're talking about is over at Sheehy Park, or that the motion speaks about is over at Sheehy Park. And the members of the City Council will recall that several months ago, we entered into a lease agreement with the university to lease spots over there for, I think, $10,000 a year. The problem is that sometimes those spots are used in the evening or in the dark hours, and there's no lighting over there whatsoever. And I think it just would be beneficial to the students attending the university, but also to the city if there was lighting there. If that park had some lights, it would certainly make it safer and a little more friendly than maybe it is right now.
Council Martin and Council Mercia.
Not on this, sorry.
Any discussion on this motion? Council Mercia.
I think it would be a good suggestion if you would have asked those two women that were here, that you requested a poll with the light on it for your motion here. Put that on the list. We could have done that.
Any further discussion on this motion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Council Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if this I need a formal point of personal privilege, but I just wanted to congratulate those that were involved in the planning and execution of the City of Lights Parade last weekend, and especially those whose decision it was to select the Grand Marshals. Celeste and Sidney Corcoran, Jeff Bowman, and Roseanne Sedoya, all of whom were injured in the Boston Marathon bombing last year. You know, I think the city is grateful for them, for their participation. I had a short time to just speak to a couple of them and offer our thanks that they were willing to participate. And I can tell you, they were truly humbled and said, well, thank you for inviting us. And so the way they've kind of faced their difficulties, I'm sure there are many dark and difficult moments, but they really present a proud face for the city. I think they were humbled to be asked, and I think they played a very crucial role in making this a citywide celebration. So thanks especially to them for their participation. Thanks for all who contribute, the volunteers. I know a number of city employees volunteer. I know we have a large number of sponsors. But to everybody who played a role, I think it was a job well done and a way to kick off the holiday season here in the city. We got some very favorable press coverage locally and in Boston, which is a nice plus. But I think really the kind of spirit of the event was among the best we've ever had here in the city. So thanks to all who made that possible.
Well said. Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Those are my sentiments exactly. Thank you to all the sponsors, the committee organizers, the people that participated in the parade, and whoever chose the Grand Marshals of the parade. That was fabulous, and they were well received, and they were just so happy to be involved. I also want to lastly thank Deb Belanger, who through her greatness brought the Greater Merrimack, she's the Greater Merrimack Valley Convention and Visitors Bureau Director, for bringing the Red Sox World Series trophy to our city as well. It was beyond wonderful, and if anyone could have pulled it off, she could have, and everybody was delighted. Along the parade route, we were behind the people and the trophy, and everybody was so excited. So whoever did this, they did a magnificent job. Thank you.
Councilman Donson.
This is on another event. December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day, will be remembered by Lowell Veterans Council on Saturday at the Lowell Memorial Auditorium, and I'm sure they're willing, they'd welcome anyone to attend with them. So that ceremony begins at 11 o'clock.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Elliott.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in on the City Lights Parade and commend the organizers in addition to selecting the selection of Grand Marshals was outstanding. But you know, there were several Boston news stations there, and it was a proud moment. Those are the types of that's the publicity type of publicity that we want, that we need. But you know, the parade it seems to get bigger and longer every year. I was sitting on Jackson Street for quite some time, and it was just amazing how many people participated. But more importantly, it was a very cold night, and it shows the pride that the people in the city have to come out in the bitter cold, in the thousands, to support the parade and kick off the season with some fun, laughter, and so many nice floats. Bands seems they're coming from all over the place, so it's a good thing, and look forward to it continuing to expand next year.
Anything further? I'd entertain then a motion to adjourn. So moved by Councilor Kennedy, seconded by Councilor Martin. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. We stand adjourned.